The challenging part is the beginning. How do we build this routine in a child life? Not all skills have the same weight. If you think about imitation, actually, it's everywhere in your environment. If you observe your child, the skill is able to transfer to a new environment.
Welcome to the Fight for 15-Minute podcast. My name is Michael Conteh, and in today's topic, we're going to talk about one of the most crucial skills that any child, particularly a young child, needs, and that is imitation. And so we get lots of questions coming from parents talking about, my child doesn't have many words yet. I'm very worried. What should I teach first? That's where we'll begin with today. So hello, Dr. Qian. How are you?
Good, doing good.
Let's just start with kind of the fundamentals. We just kind of laid out that this crucial skill is highly important. So why is imitation so important in child development?
Imitation, as I see it, is like a foundation of many skills. And imagine if you are listening to our podcast, you are concerned about your child language, or you want to teach your child simple skills or follow directions. Or even some simple thing like tie the shoes and then put a Velcro, just simple things child can do. Those require imitation. And another thing is imitation is really the building blocks. A lot of our task at school, picture preschool classroom, and a teacher would start to model and then expecting children to, kids to copy what the teacher is doing. And without being able to imitate, you cannot really model any skill as a parent. Hey, buddy, this is how we open the door so our dog can go outside. This is how we water the plants. This is how we push, a button, then the house light up. And all of this require a child be able to pay attention to see what you're doing. And then they copy your imitation, you copy your action, and then reproduce what they saw. So all of this, school success, self-help skill, speech, play skill, all of them require imitation. That's why it's so important.
It's such a beautiful way of how you phrased it. It's the all roads lead through imitation as like the tree trunk. And so verbal communication, if you want your child to talk, they need imitation as a foundation to learn that skill. If you want your child to be able to listen, direction following, you need to be able to imitate and see what's happening around you and to develop that skill. And then you think about play skills. You want people to socialize. They have to play together. You have to see what someone else is doing and do that skill. So I really like that we laid out the importance of imitation. It's the solid fundamental that really helps the brain to build on to all the skills that we want. So with that, what do we know about imitation? Can you give me an example of some of the different types of imitation skills?
So as a parent, if you're thinking about imitation, actually, it's everywhere in your environment. If you observe your child or even observe, say, the sibling, take your child to the playground, you can see all type of imitation. Let me break down. So first one is the body imitation, right? The one that I think of the most is your head, shoulder, knees, and toes, like touch your head, touch your shoulder, right? All of those, like the dance. If you have a dance party every day and good for you, I think that's your opportunity to teach a lot of skills, including imitation. And then there's object imitation. The kids, even like 9 months, they're not talking yet. They start to kind of be aware of the environment, what object in their environment, they band the blocks together, they hit the keyboard. Who cares what music you're making? Like, hey, this thing makes sound. And then the gesture imitation, you point, you wave a goodbye. And this one is a big one. And this one is the one we do not teach. If we have to choose a sequence of like which type of imitation to choose, I probably will not go with gestural imitation. This is the one we're talking about, like pointing, showing, oh, look what I got. Those are like around 11 months of age. We see that gestural imitation. But for the body imitation, the object imitation, we expect child to do that at a very early stage, like 9 months. The newborn baby can imitate facial expression. If you stick out your tongue, and then the babies do that. And research has shown that. And then there is really, the facial expression, as I mentioned earlier, like be able to pay attention to like, oh no, like you're so happy, like the smile, right? I feel really sad. What happened? Our brain is just really made for imitating. And I think one of the most recent research talking about the mirror neurons, right? Like if a friend is sad, and even though it didn't happen to me, and I feel really sad, right? That's the power of like understanding another person's feeling, their emotions. All of this is relate to imitation. It's imitation skill being really simple at the beginning, some basic motor imitation, and gradually it develop into something more complex, and be able to, follow several steps what a mom and dad are doing, like make a pancakes, for example, and the baby can observe and then imitate several steps and then make that pancake. And gradually you have a pointing, really it's a big, the distal pointing, because they see you point, get things done, they start to do that. And then have a really like complex play scheme. And then the facial expression, they are able to tell their emotion through facial expression. And as I said, it start really simple as a body imitation or object imitation, and then it get more complex as a child grows. But by the time he's 2 or 3 years old, for a child without disability, that kiddo can pretty much imitate anything.
Kind of hearing your explanation, imitation is really just a bunch of different skills that are clustered together.
Yeah.
And so from the biggest of body imitation, kind of bigger, it's easy for a child to imitate those. Then it gets a little smaller with object imitation. Then it gets smaller with gestural imitation, and even smaller with facial and oral.
Mhm.
So I think it's an interesting proximity how really it's the size of the imitation that's kind of easier for the brain to acknowledge, and then it keeps refining itself. And I think also with that, if you think about the sensory system, it's really imitating through all the different senses. So if you think about object imitation, it's a tactile sense. How can I put something together that looks like something else in my environment? Of course, a lot of it is visual. So the precursors of having ability to focus on another human being long enough
Right.
and have the
Yeah.
sensory system in place. So there's so much to that with that skill growing and emerging, there's lots of opportunities for curiosity, lots of opportunities to experiment for that brain. But then if there's a shortage there, then it's really challenging to teach a lot of those crucial skills.
Yeah, that's really good point, Michael. I think it's really the concept, right? Like in behavior analysis, we talk a lot about generalized imitation skill, meaning, we did not teach that skill and the child knows that skill, right? I taught the child, since there is a cat in our background, and I taught the child to pet a cat. It's my cat, but the next time the kiddo and mom go out for a walk and then there is a kitty there and the child start want to pet the kitty, right? That's a generalized imitation skill. It's the skill was taught in a different environment and the child observed the skill in a different environment, but guess what? The skill is able to transfer to a new environment, to even say not just pet a cat, pet a dog. And that is so important because then it can be developed into other things, like you said, more finer. Like, okay, in art class, teacher using different piece of paper to make collage, and then or using Play-Doh to make a different animals, and a child is able to copy that, not exact, but the idea is the imitation.
From our work, of course, you spent time academia. I spent, time on the provider side. It was one of the things that we just through trial and error and just kind of seeing lots of kids really honed in on very early in the process. And I still don't think, no matter what type of provider that you have for a young child, I don't think we spend enough time helping young kids learn how to imitate. I think it's just so crucial, a fundamental skill that if a child does just a little bit of imitation, we already try to speed past and try to do the complex versions or try to do all these things. And so one of the reasons why we love to empower parents is that this is something that can be done by almost any human. We've been teaching imitation skills throughout our human history. They're not owned by a particular provider. They're not owned by a certain area. I hope for people that are listening to this is to realize I can just be really good at teaching imitation. And I think you've done some of the hardest, most important concepts that will really help benefit that child moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to mention something about like, because I think so often we forgot the concept of a behavior cusp, right? Like we talk a lot in our field of applied behavior analysis, like, okay, not all skills have the same weight. If I have to choose between teach a kiddo, say, the color of blue versus skills like being able to sit down, attending a task, and then be able to pay attention to other people and imitate their action, or the joint attention concept, be able to understanding like, oh, you know what? I've been playing this activity, pouring sand back and forth for 30 minutes now. Mom want me to switch. It's okay for me to switch, and sometimes my way, sometimes mom's way. That's fine. I don't have to cry for 30 minutes. I think those skills carry way more weight compared to what color is this? A blue, yellow, red. I think that point hasn't been emphasized enough for parent training is, hey, let's pick a skill that will lead acquisition of other skills. A child who is imitate, a child who has joint attention skill, we shall not worry about teaching colors. They will get colors.
I love the simplicity of teach the most important things. Don't just teach the easy things or the things that are numeric in nature. So that's a good lesson. And I think especially for parents or providers to definitely keep in mind. And kind of talking first about what imitation is and the different types, let's just talk about some tools, kind of build a toolkit for parents and have them be able to have things that are able to help them on a regular basis. So we can start in any of the different areas, but what are some of the things that parents can do to teach imitation at home?
There's just so many things parents can do. This is something I feel like is once you have a routine, once you commit certain time of minutes a day to teach imitation, you will really start going to see changes in your child, and also the joy of teaching, the joy of, like, I call those glimmers, right? Like, for parents, especially parents of children on the spectrum, we're so used to looking for, oh my gosh, my kid hasn't done this yet. Well, my neighbor's kid has already spoken 10 words. My kid hasn't even make any single sound. Like on and on. We're just, I felt like the anxiety and the stress put our mindset in a very negative state. We were so used to looking for those negative states. Now, imitation is something once, we give you some tools we're talking about right now. And if you can commit that 10 minutes and 15 minutes in parent empowerment coaching, we talk a lot about fighting for 15 minutes. This is something you can do. Commit 10 minutes a day, and then you will be able to see the changes in your child and then changes within you. Now, the first tool I want to talk about is the idea of book reading. This is one of the routine. Once you establish, you can teach imitation, joint attention, labeling, receptive, turn a page. Oh, what is that? Conversation. And the challenging part is the beginning. How do we build this routine in a child life, right? Oh, my favorite book is Eric Carle's, like, head, toe, touch your head. I can turn my head. Can you? I read that 1,000 times to my own kids. If you have the opportunity, you have so many books where you can teach imitation. I want to share a story of a child right now. He's a high school kid, and your typical autism level 3 he's not even able to say phrases. He can only say single word like water. And we talked to mom about book reading. Mom said, oh, I never really thought about, reading the book together with him. It's just not our routine. So we started to talk to mom about, okay, let's put routine in place. And we discovered the child, our high school kid, loved that big book. Like in the preschool, you may have noticed there have like giant size book. And then mom figured out that, at night after a shower before the bedtime, and she can actually start to do the book reading activity with the child. And then because she started to see that, oh my gosh, the kid is turning a page and the child expecting the routine. And she probably have done it for 2 or 3 weeks in a row to establish that routine. Before, when we present a book, the student may even have some challenging behavior, but now mom is reading books at home. A child is able to follow that routine at school, and mom is using that book reading to teach imitation, right? Even like we're talking about, in this case, an older kid, right? Like the book have different recipe, and mom can flip the book and the kid follow the recipe. That's why I say book reading is something, once you establish a routine, you can teach anything you can think of for your child. Imitation, joint attention, self-help skill, and play skill. That would be my number one tool I want you to have in your toolkit.
Wow. There's so much richness that comes from that. And of course, it's
Mhm.
just the receptive of teaching all the nouns and the verbs. So I think the toolkit is just how can you and your child stay connected for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, these short bursts of time. And then there's amazing how you can kind of keep that process going. It goes to some of the common issues when it comes to especially young kids on the autism spectrum is they just don't get enough positive practice in
Mm.
some of these things because it can be challenging. Sometimes it can be met with least resistance. Sometimes a new thing could be met with lots of resistance. And so what you're really talking about is if you can create enough of a small routine, it really lowers their resistance and makes them more receptible to be in this place where they can get the positive repetitions that are needed to learn the skill.